we are going to speak about education for girls and females in the Sub-Saharan Africa. We have assembled a panel of experts, both from Africa and Canada and Bangladesh, so that we have a round view about the education and its challenges and opportunities. On behalf of Conflict and Resilience Research Institute, Canada, I welcome all of you to today's session. As a tradition, before we introduce and go into the event details, let me do the treaty acknowledgement. Conflict and Resilience Research Institute, Canada, is located on original lands of Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene peoples and the homeland of Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we dedicate ourselves to move forward in partnership with indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Ladies and gentlemen, as I briefly mentioned, it's a great day because we are going to talk about education, which is a fundamental human rights for all human beings. And this particular session is important because we are going to discuss the problems and prospects in very difficult situation where children are currently, they found themselves. So without further ado, let me introduce Mr. Kyaw, who is a research assistant with Conflict and Resilience Research Institute, Canada, who is going to moderate the whole session. And also, I'd like to let the viewers know that we are joined today from Bangladesh, Dr. Helal Mohiuddin, Research Director from the Conflict and Resilience Research Institute, and our research assistant, Sierra Battens. So, Mr. Kyaw, floor is yours, sir. Unmute.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed Kyaw, for the wonderful introduction. So just like the director of CRRIC has stated, today we are gathered here for a very, very important and critical discussion on education, especially in emergency situations. Education, like we all know, is a universal right, and more so for children who find themselves in crisis or children who find themselves in emergency situations, it becomes even more critical that education would involve or encompass the trauma that they go through and also give them aspiration for a better future. Today we have the great privilege of wonderful people gathering here, experts, researchers, great thinkers, particularly in the field of education and also when dealing with refugee or children in emergency situations. We are really, really honored that they could join us this wonderful afternoon here. Without much further ado, I would go ahead and introduce them. Most of them are from CRRIC, and also we have experts from our partners, AFRISDA, who are doing a very extensive kind of work in Africa, especially when it comes to some of these situations. So my first panelist that I'm going to introduce is Dr. Joe Matangwa. Dr. Joe Matangwa lives in Canada. He's the co-founder and CEO of AFRISDA. He has 13 years of wonderful experience in developing, implementing, and leading complex sexual and reproductive health and rights and gender equity portfolio, and also in HIV and nutrition, in development and humanitarian contexts such as refugees, internally displaced persons, and returnees, while working in coordination and collaboration, strategy planning, program technical advisor, and also supporting national offices and multi-stakeholder grants and diverse organizational environments that are working in a complex matrix system. He has a deep level of experience across the African continent, including countries such as Burkina Faso, Burundi. Also, he has extensive experience in Canada, also in the Central African Republic, the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, in Ghana, Guinea-Bissau, in Haiti, Kenya, Lesotho, Liberia, Mozambique, Tanzania, Uganda, Senegal, and Sudan. He has also had extensive experience in working with donors such as JSC, DFID, USAID, the European Union, the Belgian government, and of course, the United Nations agencies. Our second panelist that will join us today is Mrs. Rosine Assamoi. She also lives in Canada. She is also the co-founder and executive vice president of AFRISDA with over 22 years experience in international development, strategic planning, program implementation, oversight, coordination, and technical support. She also has extensive experience in HIV and AIDS, including youth and overseas, maternal and newborn health, sexual reproductive health, exclusive breastfeeding, gender-based violence, child migration, children on the move, education, child labor, water sanitation, and hygiene and economic empowerment. In the field of experience, she has had the opportunity to work in countries such as Cote d'Ivoire, Togo, Benin, Niger, Cameroon, Senegal, Mali, Burkina Faso, Guinea, Conakry, Ethiopia, Ghana, Liberia, Nigeria, and all over the African continent. She has had extensive experience working with organizations, international organizations such as DFID, DFID, USAID, the European Union, and of course, United Nations agencies. Our third panelist is Professor Bento Novela. Professor Bento Novela is an academician and researcher in Mozambique. His expertise involves international consultants focused on governance, strategic partnership, resource mobilization, human rights, and gender. He has also led the development of resource mobilization strategies for 9 CSOs funded by Oxfam, namely Joint, GMD, ADEL, Cabo Delgado. His countries of expertise include Mozambique, Madagascar, Tanzania, Kenya, and Seychelles. He also has extensive experience in working with organizations such as USAID, ACCG Spain, and Global Fund. Our fourth panelist will be Ms. Patricia. Ms. Patricia is a passionate humanitarian who believes in the transformative power of education. She has numerous testimonies on how children, especially girls, who get one more chance to go back to school after temporarily dropping out, ended up transforming their families and communities at large. With over 20 years of experience in international development and humanitarian work, Patricia has designed and implemented and managed multiple education programs in complex crisis and protracted conflict situations, spanning from Zimbabwe, Zambia, Liberia, Iraq, and more recently, South Sudan. Through working with overseas, conflict-affected children and youth from internally displaced families, returnees, refugees, and host communities, Patricia is highly aware of the value of mentorship for sustenance of positive outcomes as a pathway of the trajectory of peace and development. Patricia holds postgraduate qualification in education in emergencies, conflict and peace, and development studies. Our next set of panelists come from our very own home, CRRIC, here in Winnipeg. First is our director, Kyaw Ahmed. Dr. Kyaw Ahmed is an educator and researcher in peace and conflict who has in-depth understanding of social conflict and its peaceful transformation. While serving the United Nations peacekeeping operation and conflict zone, he had experience in peace building, mediation, and transformative dialogue in resolving intergroup conflict. He developed insights in conflict by studying social resistance, terrorism, and extremism in global and local context. He undertook several researches on community-focused intervention, refugee crisis, and youth extremism in Western and non-Western contexts. His research interests are interpersonal and intergroup social conflict transformation, peace building, radicalization to violence, political violence, ideology-driven extremism, and community-based intervention. He leads a Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada-based research think tank, the Conflict Resolution Research Institute of Canada, and he's also a member of the Writers' Union of Canada. Our guest speaker is also our very own Dr. Hilal Mohideen, who needs no introduction. But he's also a social scientist with nearly 3 decades of experience conducting qualitative research on diverse areas of livelihood development and human resilience. He teamed up with many commissioned research projects for UNDP, UNICEF, Action Aid, NGO Forum, and CARE International. Our final panelist is Dr. Habib Ullah. Dr. Habib Ullah is a Rohingya source person. He worked as a senior research officer at ADI, a transcriber who translates Rohingya to English. for Rutgers University in the USA, a freelance translator at Internews BBC Media Action, a senior reporter at Caledon Press Network, a freelance news editor at Akan Times. He's also a consultant for CRRIC on Rohingya matters when it comes. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, without dealing much time, I would introduce, I would give an overview of the entire project, the entire outline of how the program is going to take place. So each panelist is going to be given approximately 10 to 12 minutes to present their ideas and presentations to the audience. After their presentations, there will be a Q&A session in two parts. The first Q&A session would involve panelists themselves asking themselves questions on things that they've presented. The second Q&A sessions would be for the audience. For those listening to us, you would have the opportunity to ask the panelists a wide range of questions on the matters that they've presented. At the end of the Q&A, they will summarize and also introduce our call to action and our partners, AFRISDA, and also what CRRIC intends to do with AFRISDA when it comes to education in emergency situations in Sub-Saharan Africa. On this note, I have the opportunity, if Dr. Joe is ready, I will have the opportunity to introduce our first panelist, Dr. Joe, to present to us his ideas that we are going to discuss today. So Dr. Joe, you are welcome. Once again, thank you for your time, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our audience and the panelists and fellow panelists for the opportunity you gave to us, AFRISDA, to discuss on this issue of education in emergency, mostly focusing on girls. So I'm going to walk you through what AFRISDA is doing and what is our approaches regarding international development and mostly focusing on education. So this presentation, I'm going to do that on behalf of my colleague Rosine, who is part of our team. Next slide. Yes, okay, so as you know, so far, Africa has been divided in 6 big regions, and diaspora is one of the region, because what we have noticed so far that the diaspora, it's actually an important agent of social economic development in Africa and each of country of origin. So what's happened again that most of the government, they don't really engage diaspora. What we notice is they recognize diaspora role only in the crisis situation, but actually diaspora can really do more about that in transferring knowledge and then also involving in economic of our country of origin. Next slide. Yeah, that's why we create African Sustainable Development Advisor. We said, who knows African better than us? Why us? Because we provide contextual, relevant, and practical knowledge of Africa we are living in. And then if you see our logo and our color, that our vision of being a Pan-African. Next slide, please. Yeah, so why Africa? Because why AFRISDA? Because what's happening, what we went through that, we did context analysis, and we do our own experiences and to see exactly what have been international development role, international development aids from the past been and now. And then also we do analysis to see as what is the perspective of the donors and also what the perspective of the implementers who are government, local authorities, and local NGOs within Africa. From this analysis, what happened, it's next slide, please. What happened, we say, okay, let's create Africa, AFRISDA. And then how we can do that, we put together a group of international development experts and consultants who has knowledge and experience of African landscape. So our goal as AFRISDA is to help and to improve capacity building and system strengthening that will actually support local government, local organization to implement and deliver a sustainable development program through innovative approaches. So we really focus on innovation. We'll be talking about it later on. And then also AFRISDA is actually a great model of collaboration and a win-win partnership at all levels. So our vision is actually we need to have a government or government in Africa and African bodies who are well equipped so they can really implement meaningfully sustainable development program in line with global mandate and more equity and dignity. Yeah, so as I said, we really focus on context analysis. We put ourselves on donors' toes and then also on implemented toes. Donors, so far as you know, they've been complaining about a lot of things going on within organization in Africa. Donors are not satisfied with the return of investment. They've put money and then they receive back that those investments can't really be targeted as they plan. So there is also a serious lack of trust and confidence in national and local partners, the ability to deliver according to the donors' guideline. So donors have been complaining often because they are questioning the leadership and management of local government in Africa. And then also recipient countries often don't meet the expectation and standards. We know that donors, when they are giving money, they have expectations and then standards. But they have been complaining so far, the country in Africa or local NGOs, they can't make the expectation. The last not the least, it's actually lack of political will and country ownership. And then also donors have been complaining on the level of corruption in Africa, so we can't hide that. Other leg, it's what recipients have been complaining also about the donors. Most of the time, the donors are bringing money in Africa and other countries, but there is lack of integration of local and the regional priority. They bring money and then they force to do job. It actually doesn't match what the country need. And there is also non-harmonized of policy and difference between policies that the donors are thinking and also the national policies. There is a lack of involvement of key local decision makers. Most of the time, what we see, project has been designed here in Canada, in New York, in Washington, and then in France, they just come in Africa. They ask people to do the job, but this project doesn't really capture the need of the country. There is also lack of understanding and appreciation of local and culture context. And also, there is not clear and standardized monitoring and action plan between the donors and the recipient. What's happened now, we are facing, the world is facing pandemic COVID-19. So we know that in COVID-19, there is a lot of restriction. Most of the time, next step, please. Most of the time, countries where we support, we don't actually go there again because of the travel restriction, but we are asking local NGOs, local people in country to do the job. So actually there is a gap between what we thought and then what we are implementing in the country now. And then also lack of achievement, 50 years, women military and handicap. And also the donors are limited funded. That's actually we are, calling Global Affairs Canada that they have to increase the international development aids, what is actually around 1%. So despite the pandemic, we're still doing job in Africa. People are there, they are doing job, but we need to think outside of the box. How can we do the job differently? That's actually how we came out with AFRISDA. Next step. Next slide, please. So this is what we are doing. We do consultancy, we do monitoring, evaluation, program management, we mobilize resources, we assist country to do COVID-19 resilience and recovery. And then also we focus on knowledge transfer. Next, please. Yeah, so those are our area of action. We are really focused on youth and women empowerment, social enterprise and sustainability, the environment and climate change, child protection, social enterprise, gender equity, and global health, and then also education, equity, and equality education. So as a consultancy firm, we have our clients who has government, diaspora here, international government, international and national NGOs, foundation, UN agency, regional institution, private bank, and company. AFRISDA, we are not only intermediary, we are also implementer. So there are projects that we implement and there are projects that we facilitate the implementation. So we work straight with the government, with national NGOs, and then also independent entities. How do we do our role as Africa? AFRISDA, we really drive innovation and transformation. As I said, we work only where we assume that there is innovation. So our innovation approach, we work on technology, innovation, on approaches, and model of a business, delivery mechanisms, and then also on product and services. Yeah, so our approaches in international development, either in education in emergency or health or whatever, we really focus on collaboration as we are doing now. We partnership with our partner in Africa. We focus on knowledge transfer and then also stakeholders ownership. But above all, innovation is our master key or master word. In terms of knowledge transfer, what we do, any project that we start by bidding on business development plan or level, or also in the implementation level, we have a lead advisor. It's part of our team. We do involve someone who has compliance and finance capacity or knowledge, someone in monitoring and evaluation, and then in program management or a technical advisor for the selected sector. And from the way to go, we associate national NGOs and government to be part of our team as we are developing a project and also we are implementing a project. Yeah, so far that is AFRISDA and how we interact with our partner in Africa and actually for international developments as a whole sector and priority given to education in Africa and emergency. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very, very much, Dr. Joe, for the wonderful presentation on AFRISDA's approach to education in emergency situations. We will move next to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Habib. Habib is to give perspective from the Rohingya camps. I think it's important that as we are focusing on Africa, we also get experiences from other aspects or other parts of the world. And therefore, we called on Habib to give us his experiences and the challenges that they go through, and also the prospect of education in emergency situations, particularly in the Rohingya camps in Bangladesh. So Habib, if you are ready, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to be here today to be joining this distinguished group of participants and speakers in webinar. My name is Kyaw. I'm a Rohingya resource person working as a consultant for CRRIC. I'm very happy to be here today to talk about the Rohingya education challenges in the refugee camp in Bangladesh. First of all, I'd like to say something about my recent work that I have already completed. For the last 3 years after the influx in 2017, I start my documentation research work for ADI to submit, to collect the evidences of atrocities committed by Myanmar security forces against Rohingya community in 2017. We have done this research work. We have done this to submit to ICC and other international communities for seeking justice for the Rohingya community. And secondly, I'd like to say something about the importance of education, particularly for Rohingya community. Education is a backbone of a nation, but I can say education is the soul of a nation. The rights of that education is deprived. The Rohingya community is deprived of this opportunity. In Myanmar, they were deprived of education. That is why they were made disabled, crippled by Myanmar government. Because of their illiteracy, as they were not able to learn to study in Myanmar, they were uneducated. That is why Myanmar government could play games, could commit crimes, could expel them from citizenship. The Myanmar government could do whatever they wanted against the Rohingya community, since the community is illiterate. Now they are in Bangladesh. I have left Myanmar in 1992. In 1992, I left and I started teaching at the school in the refugee camp in 1996 under Save the Children UK. I have worked as a teacher for more than 15 years, nearly 20 years, I think. So I have experience about the Rohingya education in Bangladesh camps. As I know, donors are donating huge amount of fund for education of the refugee children. And the NGOs are also working their best to educate the refugee children. But frankly speaking, I did not see improvement in education in the camp. That is why I think the fund, the money donated by the donors was wasted. It was not useful. The refugee children were not improved in education because there are some challenges, some causes, some reasons. Refugee children are not interested to go to school. The teachers have to visit home to motivate them, to advise them to go to school. They are not willing, they are not interested at all to go to school. even in Bangladesh refugee camp. Why? The reason is they are not having formal education. They are having non-formal education, informal education. They don't get any certificate, and they don't see any future, any certain future with this education. That is why they are disinterested. On the other hand, according to UNHCR and the implementing partners who are working for education in refugee camps, they said that they are trying to convince the government to allow formal education in the camp, but the government does not agree to allow formal education. Why the government does not agree is the government concern is if the formal education, higher education is allowed for refugee children, they will be educated, they will be studying at the local university, local high schools, local schools. They will be educated in Bangladesh. They will mix with the locals. They will settle everywhere in Bangladesh, live in the camp. That is the concern of Bangladesh government. So according to me, according to my suggestion, the government can do one thing. That is, the government can allow the formal education for refugees so that they can study at university, college, everywhere. Government no need to be worried about that the refugees will be settled in Bangladesh if they are educated highly. No, it's wrong. It's wrong. If the government mention the identity in the certificate as a Rohingya or as a national of Myanmar, no Rohingya can mix with the Bangladeshi people. There is no chance to mix with the Bangladeshi people to settle anywhere in Bangladesh. If the identity is mentioned in the certificate that he is Rohingya, he is a Myanmar national, this is the way to allow the Rohingya children formal education. Otherwise, if there is no formal education in the camp, no improvement will be made. The money would be wasted. Because if the children do not get any certificate, they may not be interested because they don't see any future with this education without certificate. So my request, my earnest request to all of the participants, to all of the distinguished participants of this panel, this webinar, to urge the Bangladesh government to allow formal education for refugee children in Bangladesh so that they can be educated. And if the refugee children are educated, they will never be a burden. They will never be a burden for Bangladesh and for Myanmar and for any country. They will be welcome by any country, by any government. Even they may be welcomed by Myanmar government. Now they are not welcome anywhere because they are illiterate. They are illiterate, they are not educated, and so they are burden, a big burden for any government. So if if the organizations, concerned authorities, concerned organizations jointly urge the Bangladesh government to allow the formal education, my Rohingya community will be educated and they will make a certain future. And the money which will be used for their education will be useful. Otherwise, will be wasted. Frankly speaking, within 20 years or nearly 20 years, I have not seen any improvement. That is why, being disappointed, I have left my job. I have left my school job and joined the research work. So, as I know, here in this distinguished group of participants, Dr. Halal Muhammadin sir is also working for education in Bangladesh refugee camp, I think so. Especially, he is also requested to concentrate in this regard, so that the Rohingya community, which is vulnerable community, the most persecuted community, can be educated and they can make a future, better future. This is my request to all of you. Without formal education, we can never expect any improvement. The solution of improvement in education for the refugee children is formal education. Otherwise, no improvement will be made. This is my experience. This is my observation as I lived there for decades. So thank you very much for giving me a chance. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Habib. And thank you for joining us to the issue of education and how it is closely linked to identity and politics in the Rohingya camps. Thank you so much for that. We would move to our next panelist, and it's our very own Professor Hausa Ahmed, who would present to us Interagency Network for Education in Emergencies and its network and contribution in education in emergency. Dr. Hausa, thank you so much for your time. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Kwazo. And ladies and gentlemen, it is so much, I would say, enlightening to listen to Mr. Habib from Rohingya camps. And in this regard, let me share my own perspective from Conflict and Resilience Research Institute. We embarked into this idea of education in 2018, actually. And at that time, CRRIC was doing research for a book project on this crisis. So I still remember when I landed in one of the largest camps in the world, actually, which is called Kutupalong. And there, when I entered the camp, the first scene that I encountered is thousands of, hundreds in front of me, but there are so many children roaming around inside the camp areas. And when it was part of my field work to collect data for my book, but what I actually ended up is talking to children for over hours. And next 7 or 8 days, when I stayed in that area, Teknaf Cox's Bazar, every day when I visited for my field work, I spent a couple of hours with the children ranging from age 4 to 13, 14. And there I first started thinking that how this whole group of children spending their time in refugee camps without any particular hope for the future. And ladies and gentlemen, you have heard Mr. Habib very clearly and eloquently. He said one thing, that without formal education, the hope cannot be endangered within these young people. And this is absolutely my own conclusion after 2019, second time when I visited the camp for my field work. And from CRRIC, we first started our journey and pitching idea of education from Rotary Club of Winnipeg. And with me, my co-founder, Dr. Hilal Mohiuddin, and I, we pitched the whole idea for a global grant, and we have received a global grant eventually, and we are going to implement. But this is the key part of our whole idea, not any informal education. We are emphasizing on the formal education. And ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let me quickly touch base about my own field of interest, education in emergency. So that was the background that I started thinking about. Now, as of today, it is nearly 500,000 children in the refugee camps in Bangladesh. So we are talking about such a big number. And one of the most neglected group within these children is adolescent females. And therefore, we have focused particularly to address the need of the adolescent female in terms of education in the camps. The core of the education in emergency, ladies and gentlemen, came into existence late 1990s. And if you recall, distinguished panelists today, that during that period, there were mass displacement due to armed conflict. And if you also recall that at the end of the Cold War, so-called Cold War period, and very fast democratization started taking place all over the globe, there were instances of genocide, mass atrocities. And due to those man-made conditions, and I'm just making a difference here, disasters, natural disasters, and man-made disasters. So due to those events, there were displacements, and it's a large number. And you can go back to UNHCR's website of displaced people, and you will have the whole data. I'm not going there. So therefore, in the middle of 90s, actually 1997, a group of scholars in the education sector came up with the idea that now it is time to think about those group of people who are neglected, persecuted, and displaced from their home, and eventually took shelter in other countries. And therefore, this whole idea of education in emergencies came into existence. And as we speak now, it evolved through the conventions and seminars. And in early 2000s, there was a large seminar held in Dakar, and there was a Dakar Declaration came out that how to go about educating children in the refugee camps or the forcibly displaced camps. And there are so many in the world as we speak now. And I think the oldest one is, of course, in the Palestinian, in the Gaza, and in that particular area. But later on, it kind of proliferated in many of the places in Africa. And especially, I personally worked in Western Sahara. It's for the Polisario refugee camps located in Algeria, southern Algeria. But also we are aware of Dadaab refugee camp, one of the largest in the world again, and so forth. So the key points of education in emergencies, the whole initiative is now coordinated by a group called Interagency Network for Education and Emergencies, INEE, and it's a very organized group of education specialists, those who work day and night in developing programs and standards. So if you go to inee.org, you'll find all the data that I'm referring to. But just for our audience, very briefly, that there are three cornerstones for the standard of education that INEE set so far for delivering education in the camps. First is community participation, then coordination, and of course, finally, the analysis part. And in the community participation, it is so important, as you have heard Mr. Habib, that he mentioned the need of Rohingya population is to be gathered from them. We we are observers, we are participants, we have good heart, it's not an issue, but the need must come from them. And this is why community participation in education in emergencies is the key point. And then of course developing curricula and other things come later part. But the second important point is coordination. Again, I'm going back to Mr. Habib's comment that he said quite strongly that money is wasted, and this is one of the reason why the money is wasted, because of lack of coordination. And as you understand that hundreds of NGOs, especially in Chittagong, in 2018, to my own count, there were 127 international and national NGOs were operating. And just imagine the number of efforts and activities. Well, out of 127, all were not involved in the education delivery. Is less than 20 plus minus. So there is a fine need of coordination required in order to deliver very synchronized. And as you have heard again, that the aims of the curricula of these things should be very synchronized. And this is one of the points that INEE in their standard quite strongly put forward, that without coordination, education must not be delivered because it's total waste of time and money. And finally, of course, analysis comes in various ways, like response strategies, monitoring, and evaluation. Finally, I'll end by my part of discussion here by saying that host countries play a pivotal role in education of displaced people. For the case of Rohingyas, ladies and gentlemen, do not forget, beside Bangladesh, they are also living in 7 more countries. And you know what, ladies and gentlemen, we are not aware of their situation in those countries as much as we are aware of Rohingyas in Bangladesh. Of course, given the fact that the largest concentration of Rohingyas is in Bangladesh, we have a lot of data, and thanks to Bangladesh government to allow access to those data. And let me also, from a research point of view, share with you that not all host countries allow you the access to the refugee camps of Rohingyas. Bangladesh is one such exception. Bangladesh has opened its doors to now over 1 million of them Rohingyas, and also Bangladesh allows other researchers, NGOs to work provided they meet certain conditions in the camps. So we need to really gear up our activities towards understanding host countries' policies. And let me also refer back to Habib's comment that Bangladesh government, like any other host countries, have their concerns. And primary concern of Bangladesh government is that Bangladesh government thinks that the displaced people will go back to their homeland. It's a matter of time that Bangladesh government and their policies is dependent upon that particular premise, that they are staying here temporarily. They will eventually go back to Myanmar. But this is what I am trying to end my part of the discussion here by saying that this coordination also includes host countries and their policies, and convincing them that if we teach, if we educate displaced people in your territory, they are not going to be burdened. There are so many fundamental things in education which will help curbing extremism, improve host community and refugee situation, and improve the possibility of this whole population to take control of their life in the future. I'll end here. Thank you, Kyaw, once again for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kyaw, for the insights. We are going to move on to our next part of the presentation. I would invite Mrs. Rosine Assamoi, and also I would invite Mrs. Rosine Assamoi to lead a panel discussion. Then after that, we would also invite Madam Patricia and Professor Bento. Then we would invite our guest speaker to also give us his insights, Dr. Hilal Muddin, to give us his insights on what we've discussed so far. Madam Rosine, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you everyone, and thank you Habib, Dr. Kwazer, and Dr. Helal, and everybody, Chera, Patricia, and also Bento Novela. Thank you very much. This is a great opportunity and for this honor. Yes, we started earlier with the Rohingya experience, and then we are going to talk about Africa now. You know, at least that will give us the opportunity to try and triangulate the information, try to see what works, what doesn't work, and the challenges. If the challenges are similar, what can we do to advance the issue of education in emergency? But as we know, education is part of the SDG 4. So it's very important. It says equitable, inclusive, and so it has to be the same for everybody. But I think that I'll leave my conclusion, I'll leave some point for the conclusion, because some of the points were quite interesting. So I think that we should hear from Patricia and Dr. Bento first. And once they're done, we can then, have the questions from everyone. At least we can have questions from different sides instead of just going with Habib. If you can, is it possible, Kwado?
Yes, it's possible. So I have Professor Bento on WhatsApp on speaker.
Yeah.
So we can go ahead and have the session with Patricia and Professor Bento.
Okay.
Just to make sure that Professor Bento can clearly hear us and we can clearly hear him, I would ask him to just introduce himself to the panelists and the audience as well. So Professor Bento, thank you for joining us this afternoon. We thank you, we appreciate your time, and we are happy for you to join us.
Okay, thank you. Well, I can hear you perfectly. I don't know if you can hear me there.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to speak louder as much as possible once I'm joining via WhatsApp. Well, I think I'm already presented. We can go to the slides. I can't see now the slides because I'm on WhatsApp, but we can go to the slides. I will do quick presentation from the first slide where we have the title, Education in Emergency for Girls in Sub-Saharan Africa, the case of Cabo Delgado province in Mozambique. Well, why do I present about Cabo Delgado? Probably you know, Cabo Delgado is the northern province of Mozambique where we are facing the issues of armed attacks, but also we have been facing the issues of cyclones in Cabo Delgado. So when it comes to internally displaced people, IDPs, Cabo Delgado is the peak in the country where we have the issue of emergency as a big problem. We have also in Sofala province where we had Idai, the most big one cyclone of the last 100 years around here. So I will focus on Cabo Delgado. You know, for our government, based on our constitution, education is a priority to achieve the development, and is also a right and duty for all the citizens. By the way, even being like this in our country, we are still facing the issue of barriers to access education in general. But when it comes to the education for girls in particular, the issue becomes more negative. And it is perpetuated in all the country because of the social and cultural norms. And when we go to the context where we are having this issue of armed attacks, the issue of cyclones, the issue of COVID-19, it becomes more challenged than ever. Why? Because many of people that are displaced from one place to another, when they arrive in the destination, they prefer to give priority to boys than girls to go to school, has been not a problem for them based on the fact that girls can grow up and get married. So let's come back to the emergence context, where the education is a problem, is a challenge for all boys and girls. We face with issues such as having lack of conditions of hygiene in schools, in particular, or sanitations condition. I'm talking about water or even private toilets. We have some schools where we have one toilet or one latrine in this case, and this latrine is to be used both by boys and girls. And based also on our social and normal and cultural issues, boys and girls can't use the same latrine. So in these cases, girls are not being motivated to go to school. In the case that we have classrooms, we are facing the problem of water access in these IDP camps, in the destination of these people coming from the attacked areas, or where they have been facing the issue of cyclone. So when they go to this place or the IDP camps, they don't get these conditions. What happened is the dropout from school of girls, the number rise up more than before. But it is being a problem after problem, because before we face this kind of situations, as I said, based on social and cultural norms, girls are not a priority to go to school. And additionally, we are having this problem of not having water access to make sure that the girls can get dignity to start, dignity to stay in school during the time that they must attend to that lessons. And you can see that in terms of number, we have more than 104,000 displaced people. And in Mozambique, 52% of people in Mozambique are women, and around 60% are girls in this number of women. So this is perpetuating the issue of people of girls not having access to education. And when it comes to the vulnerability and emergence contest, the need assessment that was conducted by different platforms, different organizations from UN and the COSAC, which is a platform, is a coalition of NGOs in Mozambique who works on the issue of emergence. They have concluded that the access to education remains as an important concern for children in these areas, who constitute between 45 to 50% in general. Although access to learning spaces is relatively easy across the rest of the region, in 94% of the localities, students need more support with school materials because they are coming from the area where they suffer the attacks, and these issues make them not having conditions to go to schools in terms of didactic materials. So the government is not being able to provide these conditions. The NGOs are not being able to provide these conditions. That's why even now we are still fundraising, we're still engaging with different partners to make it possible that we can promote the issue of quality education. I knew that the ERA is an NGO working on WASH facilities. They are now increasing their budget to respond to this need. I was applying in the last 2 months for a call from BHA, Bureau of Humanitarian Response from USAID, and there was not allowing, for example, constructions of latrine, constructions of water point, but there was allowing, for example, rehabilitations. But not always is possible to rehabilitate where you don't have nothing built. So last 2 weeks, BHA came back and said, oh, yeah, now we can allow you to have more 2 million USD to rehabilitate, to construct new latrines in the IDPs and school, because now we realize that the issue of girls' education is becoming a problem in Mozambique, in Cabo Delgado in this particular case, because of this issue of watch issues. So I think that the work that is being done is a result, but I'm talking about only 2 donors, which is ERA and USID. So this is something that is still demonstrating we need to do more. I think I have more 2 minutes. In terms of quick findings for this conclusion, I was happy when I heard Dr. Joe sharing about AFRISDA when he was talking about the political willing. Why? Because the implementation of education policies is still a challenge in our country and in Cabo Delgado in particular. When we look at natural hazard, armed attacks, human resource capacities, and lack of infrastructure, corruption as well. But the issue of the political will, effective political will, is a big problem, because we used to receive sometimes direct support to the government to respond to the issues of girls' education. But the problem is, in our government, our leaders seems to not having information, not having capacity to understand the problem of not educating girls. But at the end of the day, we understand that they know and they're aware about what is the consequence of not educating girls. But what happened is they are preferring not to invest on girls' education because of this issue of political willing. We understand also that there is an issue of trauma, and this issue of trauma by the armed attacks is the biggest problem, and there is a need to have this psychosocial support for this group of people who suffer it. Because when we talk about girls' education, we can't forget about the behavior of the parents of that girls, because there must be people who are supported after this trauma. We have also concluded that the civil society organization must be more engaged with the IDPs and advocate for government transparency and accountability in the response after armed attacks and natural hazards, including allowing the civil society organization to monitor the use of funds and resources received in this matter, particular focus to education sector and more especially for girls. Well, these are quick findings that I wanted to share in this webinar, because my understanding is, while remaining not pushing timely about this issue of girls' education, many of the issues will not be taken as a serious problem. I was on national TV last week, and we was talking about this issue of girls dropout based on the issue of no water in schools. And I remember someone who was calling like, every time these guys, education specialists, are insisting talking about the same issue. We now know, like, we don't need to talk more about it, but the response is not there. So my understanding and my thesis is we must continue insisting, we must continue repeating that we need to have these wash facilities, watch conditions in school to make sure that girls can go back to school. Because after an attack or after any natural hazard, the priority is shelter, the priority is food. But the non-food items, like hygiene facilities for girls, is something that is being ignored. And this is perpetuating this issue of girls drop out from school. And my understanding is we must talk more about it and push many people and organizations as well as entities to join this challenge, and we will win together. Thank you. If I took time, I'm sorry for that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bento Novela. That was quite interesting. We moved from the political and institutional, aspects of, the political will, and then the identity issues from, Habib. And then we are at the camp itself, and what is happening inside a camp. And we know that Mozambique is on the east coast of Africa, and South Sudan is a little bit, up there. So it's different contexts also. So there are a couple of questions that we have. I think we can start a little bit, making it a little bit interactive before we go to Mozambique, and then we can start asking questions. Kyaw, do you think it's okay? Or do you want Patricia to finish?
I think if Patricia finishes, then we can.
Oh, we're gonna go with the round of questions.
Yeah, we
okay.
can go with the round of questions, and yeah.
All right. Okay. So Patricia from South Sudan. So give us your experience from South Sudan, and then we'll go with the round of question and in the interactions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rosine. Thank you very much to all the panelists. I will talk about lessons from South Sudan, and as you will notice, my presentation will be the voice of a practitioner who has actually been on the ground, like on the front line. So when we talk of education in emergencies, for some it might sound a very distant phenomenon, but I just want to draw your attention to everyone that one can easily argue that in 2020, 2021, virtually every child who's of school-going age in the world has benefited from education in emergencies. We all know that schools were closed due to COVID-19, and all the education institutions had to adapt to ensure that children continue to access education, they continue to learn, they access protection, and also in the process, we can also build back better after this COVID. So COVID-19 has been an emergency, which we all responded to differently in the developed world and also in the developing world. Let's move to the next slide, please. So basically my presentation, I have structured in such a way that I'll give a brief overview of some of the statistics, and then I'll talk a bit about the gender disparities that we are seeing in South Sudan, where I am currently based. And then from the practitioner's point of view, I will just give a brief analysis of the factors that influence access to education. And then I will talk a little bit about how we can effectively respond, and then I will conclude my presentation. So according to Education Cannot Wait, girls who are living in crisis context are 2.5 times more likely to be out of school than those who are living in countries that do not have crisis. So you can imagine what this has done in crisis countries, especially if we look at the additional burden that has been brought up by COVID-19. Education Cannot Wait also goes further to say 72% of primary school-aged girls do not attend school, as compared to only 64% of the boys in South Sudan. So here there is a serious gender disparity where more girls are out of school as compared to the boys. South Sudan also in the region has got the lowest proportion of female students who are enrolled in primary schools, and also the second lowest of girls who are enrolled in secondary school in the region, because of factors like early marriage and the need for them to be involved in domestic responsibilities. And when we talk of the region where South Sudan is, we are looking at countries like Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, Sudan, Somalia. So we see South Sudan ranking at the very bottom of the education indicators in that region. In 2018, Oxfam conducted a study, and they found out that 10% of the girls get married before they reach the age of 15. When they are still in their early teens, they are married off. This further increases gender disparity in the completion rates. And also, please, let's just go back a little bit, sorry. Most of the girls in emergency-prone rural areas are overaged for their grade level. So if I link this with the earlier point, you will see that you start off your primary education when you are already overaged. Let's say at 12, you are in primary 1, when you were supposed to start at age 6. And because you will be married off at age 15, you might only have been attended primary school for 3 years. And that does not make much difference in your life. Let's move on to the next slide. So why do we have fewer girls in South Sudanese schools? There are a whole host of factors that range from economic, social, cultural, and political. South Sudan is the youngest nation in the world, which gained its independence in 2011. Ever since 2013, the country has undergone various cycles of conflict and displacement at the large scale. Furthermore, there have been lots of localized intercommunal violence characterized by cattle raids, kidnappings, abductions, and revenge killing. And the cycle goes on and on and on. And when these violent episodes take place, parents tend to protect more their girl children and stop them from going to school. Furthermore, we also notice that even though it is unlawful for teachers to administer corporal punishment, in South Sudan it is still practiced, especially in hard-to-reach areas where there is limited supervision of how teachers deliver education in the schools. Another factor is that schools are viewed mainly as a male environment. The national average of teachers, we only have 16% who are female teachers, and this also discourages girls from going to school. Distance to schools also increases girls' vulnerability. There are so many factors, protection concerns that are there on the way to school. Early marriages, we end up with adolescent mothers. They are stigmatized and pushed out of schools instead of being encouraged to stay in school. And we also see poverty, food insecurity, making families think that girls can be used to help in bringing in livelihoods, and they are pulled out of school. Also, South Sudan has got a huge proportion of pastoralist community. We see a number of girls taken away from homes to the cattle camps, and they move on a seasonal basis following water and pasture, making them not able to access education regularly. Let's move to the next slide. So when we analyze factors that actually affect access to education for girls in South Sudan, they come from different angles: the demand side, the supply side, as well as the enabling environment. At the center, we have our girl there. Our girl values education. She wants to go to school. She wants to have access to relevant education, which can make her useful in the society. She also wants to be protected. She wants to get a certificate that my earlier presenter was talking of, so that she can use this education to access employment and income earning opportunities. But there are so many factors that she has to fight. On the demand side, it's economically inaccessible. Parents, communities, and cultural norms are not valuing girls and boys equally. There is discrimination. There are safety concerns. She has to fight all these things on the demand side. On the supply side, learning spaces and facilities, they are not suitable for girls. We have heard of places in Mozambique where there are no latrines. It's also similar to South Sudan. So the school environment is not so inviting. Teaching and learning materials are inadequate. There's also sexual gender-based violence in schools, and there are inappropriate practices, even though there is the teacher's code of conduct, but it's rarely followed. And enabling environment, there are policy gaps. We also see that there is a chasm between good policies that are there on paper and practice. There is low funding. The government is not putting in adequate funding to education, and health concerns where some children will be having physical and mental issues. They cannot access education. Let's move on to the next slide. So from the practitioner point of view, what are some of the things that I have been involved in that I have seen as an effective model of supporting girls to access education? we are saying girls do not live in isolation. They do not live in a vacuum. They live within a family. They live in a community. So for us to enable our girl to go to school, we need to be addressing factors at all these levels. We need to be using an integrated approach for maximum benefit. There is an interplay of poverty, hunger, security, and girls' education. So for as long as those issues that militate against girls' safety, girls' security are not addressed, it will not be possible to ensure that girls are accessing quality education. At the policy level, it is very essential for us to continue advocating at local levels in the communities with local chiefs, traditional leaders, for behavior change towards girls, not to look at girls as an instrument to bring in money through marriage, but also as valuable people who can contribute to development. We need also to be using the rights-based approach, which also addresses rights to water, rights to education, and all these other enablers that we can talk of. So in summary, what I am saying here is, it is essential for anyone who wants to get into education in emergency to work with families, including boys as well as community, to ensure that girls are supported and they can also access education. And when we talk of community, we are also even looking at the education authorities at the local level as well as the national level. Let's move to the next slide. From the practitioner point of view, I just want to share some of the processes that I have been engaged with to ensure that girls continue to access education, especially in emergencies where that chain can easily be broken. It is essential to mainstream protection, because some of the reasons why girls are not going to school are protection concerns. They fear being raped, they fear being beaten, they fear being abused, and all those other things. So we need to be mainstreaming protection. And working in South Sudan, I am also working with a number of actors where us as education players cannot address these issues directly. We refer to other actors who are better placed, like child protection actors and health actors, nutrition actors, to address the other needs of the girls. It is also essential to ensure that girls access life skills training. They need to be assertive, to stand up for themselves, to defend their rights. And this is something that we can only do when we engage in life skills training. Community dialogue sessions to ensure that men, women, boys, girls are also at the same level when we talk of the importance of educating girls. I will just pick on a few. I'm not going to discuss every detail that is on there due to the interest of time. Working with girls in South Sudan also, I have been involved in girls' consultation meetings and feedbacks. Half the time we assume that we know what girls want, but we rarely take time to consult them. But I have seen that there is so much value in consulting the girls, listening to their stories, allowing them to tell you what they want. That way it helps us as practitioners to adapt our programs in such a way that we can respond to the real needs. Earlier on, I mentioned that the school environment in South Sudan is very male-oriented. We are trying to balance this out by introducing school mothers and also having more female teachers who can mentor girls and make the school more inviting for girls. The government also has put in a National Girls Education Day, which is commemorated across the country, where solidarity messages and encouragement is put across so that girls can be encouraged to come to school. Also, girls' scholarships have been offered. For example, there's a program called Girls Education South Sudan, funded by the UK Aid, and it gives direct scholarship support to girls, but it also gives block grants to schools so that they also get better infrastructure. Also, finally, mental health and psychosocial support, which is very important, especially in a conflict environment where these girls face lots of psychological traumas and other disturbances due to conflict, war, and displacement. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Some material support that I have been involved in sharing with the girls include childcare support for adolescent mothers. This is a situation where you just set up an annex to the school where adolescent mothers can bring in their children whom they are breastfeeding, and they are taken care of by a baby minder whilst they attend classes, so that they can concentrate without worrying about what is happening to their children. An earlier presenter also talked about infrastructure and ensuring that we have got disaggregated latrines to invite girls to the schools. Also, provision of dignity kits. Basically, these are menstrual hygiene management kits. We have seen that girls also miss school because of the challenges that they come across when they are menstruating, because most of these schools do not have access to a reliable source of water. And in the work that I have done, we have also constructed what we call comfy corners, which is just a place where girls can go, change themselves, and make sure their sanitary items are well taken care of. Other interventions include giving girls take-home packages, especially for those schools that are benefiting from school feeding. This has been an effective intervention, which even encourages families to send their girls to school. Of course, primarily because they will get a food package, but as girls go to school, they will also benefit from learning. Cash vouchers alongside the scholarships have also helped to keep more girls in school. Okay, let's move on to the next slide, please. Lessons learned. We have learned that education is life-saving. It is very important to prioritize it in all emergencies. We have also learned that the longer children stay out of school due to emergencies, it is highly likely that they will drop out. Therefore, bringing in education in emergencies ensures continuity and reduces the chances of dropping out. Education, since it is a life-saving, it is very important to include it in the first phase emergency response. And this improves educational outcomes because the time that children will be out of school will be lessened. Let's move to the next slide, please. So we are saying, despite conflict, despite displacement, despite climate-induced emergencies like floods, in South Sudan in 2020, we experienced the worst floods that have never been experienced for over 5 decades. Girls still desire to go to school. They want to learn, they want to be protected, and they want to survive, and not only to survive, but to thrive and contribute. So some of the drawings that you are seeing there, they were drawn by girls whom I work with when we conducted the child feedback and consultation meetings. They were talking of their dreams, their aspirations, their hopes. They want to be doctors, they want to be nurses, they want to talk to their mothers, artists, they want to travel the world. They can only do that if they get education. Dreams, hopes, and aspirations. So what we have to do as practitioners, policymakers, researchers, is not to kill these dreams, but to ensure that we can nurture them so that girls can also be part of the society, which will contribute to maternal health, mental health, physical health, also reduce gender-based violence, as well as contribute directly to development. Let's move to the last slide, please. The picture that you see there, I took it from one of the schools that I worked with. Those are the girls who had just finished writing their final exams, getting out of school. They are excited. They want to go out to the world to contribute and to make a difference. I have followed up a few of the girls whom you are seeing there. I am happy to say some of them are about to complete their studies in nursing school. Some of them are in teaching school. Some of them are in Juba University. They are studying their ICT. So even in the face of emergency, if we continue to give education, it can still make a difference. I can assure you, the girls whom we are seeing on the pictures, they will make a huge contribution, and they are not going to be married as children, but they will become adults who contribute to the development of South Sudan, Africa, and the world at large. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Thank you. From South Sudan, I think that Kwado, do we go to the questions or we give the floor to somebody else before I go to the questions?
Yes, thank you very much. So I think before we move to the Q&A, we would like to hear from our guest speaker before we lead us into the Q&A. So Dr. Helaluddin, you have the floor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so very much, distinguished panelists. It's so enlightening. The discussions we could probably continue for another 2-3 hours, but we are running short of time. So I will be complementing some of the information that you have already shared with us today, this afternoon. And it's a very interesting that you have really focused about challenges that you are facing and the customization of your education intervention program in line with that. It's a really wonderful insight that would help us customize our activities in the Rohingya camps as well in our education projects. I would be very brief, just a few points. Education is just, I think, it's a gulf that we can't just get the end of it. It's an ocean. So there are a lot of problems, a lot of challenges for sure, and there are different types of intervention policies as well. Just 3 things that we are thinking at this moment to integrate into our Rohingya related activities. Brother Habib very clearly pointed out the problems that are facing the Rohingya communities, especially the refugees in the Rohingya camps. But 3 things I think very important, and I would be just talking about those 3 things. One is trauma. Indeed, it's very important, especially in conflict zones. And this was not really addressed that well in education. So this is a new discourse, I should say, trauma, and how trauma is really affecting educational planning. Number 2, displacement. This is one of the most important things that we are covering now, and probably we will need to talk more even in the near future. And the third one is emergencies. So emergencies could be, I think I would just give you a wider perspective about emergencies, like even the cyclones and other natural calamities, man-made calamities, not only conflict, not only war zones. So these are also very important, especially in refugee situation. So we have a lot of problems even with Rohingyas. Like, okay, if I go for the first one, trauma, we need something in education planning there. It's our understanding by now, upon discussing different actors and stakeholders that are working for education service provision, service providing activities. As you are talking from the practitioner's point of view, I think you would be very interested to know that. So we had a lot of discussions, and these days we are trying to get more interaction with them, and we are also consulting their literatures, their findings, research findings. So trauma, if we take that into consideration, I believe adaptation is of course a very important thing. Customization needs to be very systematic and an ongoing process. So adaptation is very important. Second one is assimilation. Like for Rohingyas, what would we really integrate? As Brother Habib was saying about formal education, that it is a necessity. There are some political, problems with making it formal. We understand that Bangladesh government, like in Bangladesh government is very supportive, but still there are problems that they're sorting out, finding out that if we go for formal, we'll have to give them formal, all the facilities and logistics and everything, then formal rights as well. They will claim for something, formal job as well. But what would be the ultimate goal of that formal education? So these questions are coming out. So adaptation is very important. Assimilation is very important. What we really need to assimilate, probably formal and non-formal both. We need a new approach for sure, and these approaches are evolving approaches that we need to entertain. We need to accept at some point. Then resilience is very important point that we need to know, because trauma driven or trauma centric situations, especially the environments that are very unstable, people are very fragile and very vulnerable. Making them settled, mentally settled and physically settled is a very big job. It's very challenging task. And the fourth I would say is safety net. So safety net is very important there too. If they don't have all these things, SDG 4 United Nations is talking about it. There are questions these days that okay, how the SDG goal would be achieved, accomplished through using rights-based approach or needs-based approach. It's a question, valid question. We have to take that into consideration. Then it should be top-down or bottom-up. It's another question. It should be participatory or non-participatory. I think we need a good combination, good matches of all those ideas. Corporal punishment, one important thing, that intervention level, okay, what would be the intervention strategy? Whether educators' sensibilities would be more important or both, and who will teach that? And this is why we have integrated in our project that we will be launching. We are really using two new approaches. One is formative approach, formative education, and another one is transformative education. So what would be transformative education? We need a long-lasting, sustainable outcome. Like we would be educating, probably first we will be giving the trainers training, educators the training. The first part is done. And then it will multiply. Like we will train 20 teachers, then they will give education to 100 adolescent female girls, and those when our project will be phasing out, will be coming out, will not be there anymore, but still the project, the activities, the intervention will continue, because all of those graduated students, whatever level they are, we will just have a benchmark, and after that they will probably one will educate another 2 or 3. So you see 100 adolescent girls, they will be teaching 300 adolescent girls, and those 300 will multiplying to 900, and the 900 to 2700. This is the transformative education approach that we are going to use. It's a pilot project, so it's an experimental action research, as you understand. If it works better, then probably we would be able to have a good model, and we would be having a good standard to share with you again and again and again. But your experience is very important, and I really appreciate you all to sit with us today, to give us those insights, because we are very interested about Africa. Situations are more or less same in these situations, especially displacement conditions. So I'll be finishing just in 1 or 2 minutes. I just need to say the second thing, like displacement, this needs to be really focused on different grounds, because displaced people are disenfranchised. That's the most important thing. They are disentitled as well. They don't have entitlement. They can claim with a strength, with a strong voice, that look, why would not you give me education? If someone phases out or withdraws, like government program, an NGO program, you are an NGO, you are running an NGO, you have intervention programs, and it depends on external funding. When funding is gone, you are also leaving, and these people are crying, right? They are expecting you to be there because they loved you and you also loved them and you also got a good relationship between them, but you are bound to phase out, and these people are asking you that no, please don't leave. But you have emotional attachment and you are breaking that tie, because you are bound to do that. So we also lose sustainability, and these people cannot even say with a stronger voice that look, you have to stay there no matter how much suffering we are having with money or funding or other things. We will be arranging money from ourselves. They have these emotions. We have seen in the grassroots level that when NGOs have some really participatory interventions, people become very much together. And then the uncertainty, that question is very important with displacement, because these people don't have permanent shelter. And this is why they don't belong anywhere. They don't feel mentally, emotionally belonged to anything. So it's a kind of strong alienation, if we say in Marxist language. This is one of the biggest challenges. That's why we cannot really make any, because they don't feel within it, inside it. They always think we are detached. We cannot get any output out of this. These are just temporary sort of, band-aid solutions people are coming up with, and it will not have any long-lasting impact. So they are not confident, and we have to build their confidence in these regards. And the last one, I would say emergencies. In emergency situations, these people, this is our understanding. I have just recently, I was going through different literature, and I noted down something. These literature are really important because we are going to start our project soon, probably from the next week. And that's why I'm taking full-fledged preparation. And it gave me some insight, real good insight, that, okay, two important things. One is discrimination and another one is disparity. Probably that's another thing that we need to, really study well, just to customize our intervention programs and action research programs everywhere, even in Rohingya cases. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Halil. I think that was quite an interesting and very short and succinct intervention, because you touched on a couple of things. Before I even, I don't know, there were a couple of questions quickly, but it looks like the questions were asked. Somebody was asking, why are local perspectives so important in education development activities? I think it was already addressed, because Dr. Quasar mentioned that the community approach is very important, because we have to hear from the people. We need to know from the youth what they want, because as you all say, there have been a lot of interventions. And Patricia, for example, mentioned, I think that, she mentioned she gave the inputs, the programmatic approaches and interventions. And those are things that are being done over and over again. So at some point, we have to sit back and reflect. And this is where CRRIC is very important. Those that do the research is very important, because we have to sit back and look at it. Even though the UN organization, the NGOs don't have time to do that, we have to sit back and reflect and say, okay, we're doing all these approaches. What is really happening? And, Dr. Halil, I think that you touched on very important points, because we write the proposals and we put in it trauma, we put it in displaced, we put it in emergency. The wordings are there, but you don't touch at the core, at the how do you say it they say it in linguistic, the origin, to know exactly what it means, because you kind of dissect it clearly, what displaced is. And it looks like we scan through it and then we just go by our interventions. We talked about the politics and the identity. It's not because it's in Bangladesh. It's not because it's in India. It's the same everywhere. It's maybe we haven't looked at it. Even in Africa, we have the same problem of displaced and identity. Okay, I'm here in the Ivory Coast. They were displaced in Ghana. They must have suffered something somewhere, displaced in the north. People are displaced everywhere, and the issues are the same. And maybe the solutions that we don't have, we haven't touched it, but whatever is happening in Bangladesh, we can still learn from that and try to tailor our interventions. One other thing that Dr. Habib said, which is quite interesting, is he mentioned something about he mentioned the identity. I must have forgotten, but I think that we are all linked. We have the same issue. The problem of the donors, okay, yes, he mentioned clearly that the money comes, they bring the money, but there is no real impact. The results are not there. So if you're pouring the money and you are telling the organizations what to do, they don't have the time and they don't take the time to listen to the people and address it. So that's why, you know, there are a lot of approaches. It has to be done at the design. And this is what we are mentioning when we talk about AFRISDA. We have to look at it at the core and then work even with the research institute and see what is happening, what can we take that hasn't been done, and how can we improve it. And another thing that was mentioned by Habib, was the issue of the non-formal education. I know my years of working, I've managed some education project, and I was vocal about non-formal education, especially in those, developing countries that they call it. It doesn't take us anywhere. It may be important for those that are, past a certain age, but for young children, non-formal education is not taking us anywhere if we consider, that education is the backbone and the soul of a community, but I would say a country, not even a community. If education is a human right and a universal right and fundamental, so I think that we should give the chance, even those that are in an emergency situation, those that are in the refugee camp, those that are displaced, to give them the chance at least. If they're 10, maybe 5 can continue and even go to university, but give them the chance and put everything there for them to have this opportunity, like those that are in a non-fragile state, or that, in areas where you have the normal school system. So I believe that, there is the Dr. Kwazer, really, maybe you will have a last word to say, but, I appreciate the work that people are doing in research. And it needs to complement what NGOs are doing, what other organizations are doing. It's not just it shouldn't be business as usual, and we have to really look at it differently. So I thank you all. We took a lot of time. Somebody asked about COVID, but I think we all know what is happening in the COVID situation. But there was one question maybe anybody can answer. What policy recommendation would you have to ensure that women and girls have equal access to education, to men and boys? So I think anybody can ask, because we focused the discussion on girls, but the problem of equal access still remain. So what can we do better, rather than the usual thing that 50-50 and 20-30? And so we have to go at the core of the issue. So I just want to stop there, because it's so interesting. I could have, go on, because at least somebody touched important issues. And I would like to thank each and everyone for this opportunity. And Dr. Kwazer, this is really an opportunity. Dr. Halil, Sarah, you haven't said a word. I can see maybe we should at least give you a chance to say a word on what is happening. So I think Dr. Kwazer, I think I will leave. I will let you. If somebody want to answer the question, okay, fine. But Dr. Kwazer, I can give you the last word, and at Kwado also. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Rosine. Thank you very much. Dear audience, we have passed our stipulated time. So I beg the apology if our research assistant Sierra has not spoken a word, but you must be assured that Sierra and Koazo, both of them planned this whole session today, and the questions were designed by Sierra. And she's a wonderful person, very passionate about humanitarian activities. So let's congratulate both Sierra and Koazo for successfully organizing this event. Thank you very much. Last word is always very difficult, because I don't have last word. But what I have to say to the audience, that thank you very much for being with us. We tried to bring Africa into discussion, and Rohingya, that is our core research from Conflict and Resilience Research Institute. You have heard Dr. Halal, who is our project director for 2 of the projects which are being run targeting Rohingya children. So one is funded by MCIC, which started in April 12th, but unfortunately we got stuck with COVID-related restrictions, but it is again going to resume within next week or so. And the second, a little bit of larger project that Dr. Helal is going to manage is funded by Rotary International Global Grant. And we would like to once again remember the support of Rotary Club of Winnipeg for this project. And dear audience, I think it is high time, let me share with some of the future plan. CRRIC will partner with AFRISDA in a very short term, and we are going to work as partners in the sector of female education, both in Africa and in Bangladesh in the future. And what we would also like to share with you, dear audience, is that we are very close to designing and also getting a donors conference with regards to a very large project titled Remote Learning. And we have already planned the necessary activities, and we would hope AFRISDA would be happy to participate in the discussions and the designing part in the future. And before I just say, let's say, finish the discussion, our proposed model in terms of education, what we call education M+, for the displaced people in the camps. And we have these components built in, which we think, I'm not going to explain further because it's submitted as a chapter in a book. But the point is, what we are trying to implement is this model for specifically Rohingya female children in the camps. So without further ado, let me once again express my deep gratitude to all the panelists from Africa and Toronto, and from Bangladesh, Mr. Habib and Dr. Helal. And let's say good night and duly meet next time. And we hope we will work together collaboratively in the field of education for the children in emergencies. Goodbye.
We're looking forward.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.